It's a pleasure to welcome David James Brock here today. We're outdoors at a safe distance in High Park in Toronto's West End. David, when you and I first talked about combining Chopin's Four Scherzi with your own writing, I think it was the end of 2017,
Right.
almost more than 3 years ago.
Yeah, you would come to me with this idea that we would have some sort. You were actually very hands-off in a way. You said we would have some companion pieces, poems, monologues to the Chopin music, and I was thinking about them truly as responses. So I approached them as ekphrastics, ekphrastic poetry, which is essentially poems written to expand the meaning of a piece of art. So I thought, okay, I'll try that, applying that to my response to the music. So you sent me your favorite recording. I don't know if it was your favorite recording, but
I think there were four different
okay,
pianists for each of the four different scherzos.
Right. So your mixtape of the four highlights of the pieces. So I would sort of draft them during listening to them. So I gave one listen, and then I said, okay, I'm just going to sort of start to free associate or sketch out what I'm hearing, colors I'm hearing, tones I'm hearing, moods, and try it and sort of gear at least the first drafts towards an initial response, so that it actually truly was like a response to the music, which I was not overly familiar with before you shared these pieces with me.
And having this kind of response through writing is the definition of ekphrastic art.
Yeah, generally it's with a piece of visual art. It's putting words to the visual. But we're bending the rules a little bit on that sort of definition. And again, I wanted that early thing to be a response, and then to worry about structure and worry about some of the things that now it's become. Yeah, and then I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, but some of the things that it's become since, where originally I sort of imagined it as maybe you would play and I would read them. I think that was like at the very simplest form in a more recital form, but not that was the most exciting thing, but I thought that maybe might be where a piece like this would go, knowing that we had worked on some, we had discussed some similar ideas with different projects, or
because it was never going to be recitation over piano playing.
Right? I didn't think so. No. I think that would have probably been a mess. But I don't think I ever imagined that way.
Yeah.
At the I was writing a heck of a lot more poetry at the time. I think I was working on a book, or my last book had just come out, which is a collection of poetry. And so I still had this sort of muscle, if that makes sense. And I think if I remember correctly, these four pieces, the Gallows Humour poems, were the first four poems I read after my collection had gone to print. So they were an opportunity to do something new that wasn't sort of locked into that book.
Yes.
So I remember that being, I remember the first versions kind of coming out around the time of the book, because I remember you were gracious enough at the first recital concert to have some books on sale. So that was very kind. So I think I'm remembering correctly, but
we did, because I think this would have been 2018 when we gave the first performance, the premiere of 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And the book you're talking about, of course, is 10-Headed Alien.
10-Headed Alien, yeah.
Which is your second complete book of poetry.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I don't remember, I don't mention that for the plug. I'm just sort of putting the timepieces together.
Right.
But I do remember in the lead up to that, how we took that little leap from, okay, this isn't piece, poem, piece, poem, piece, poem. This is going to be something else. So we started working with Heather Marie Annis on a more staged version. So you would play and she would come out and act at some point we started referring to the poems as monologues, which I liked, because I think I identify a little bit more as a playwright still. So I really liked that. At some point we shifted our language from these are ekphrastic poems, which we still use, to these are monologues. And I think that helped us sort of get it to the next stage, which was theater in a way. Yes. And I remember you were playing in the Glenn Gould studio.
It was the Glenn Gould studio, yeah, in 2018.
And I remember the reaction. I loved it, because it was sort of a weird little hybrid of three things to me. And even like the process of rehearsing and kind of having a little bit of directing hand in it. I liked that process of going, I don't really know what this is, but we were kind of felt like we were figuring it out together, which I thought was really wonderful from a collaborative standpoint.
It was wonderful. It was great to have you with us. It was, I mean, in hindsight, it sort of served as a workshop.
Totally a workshop where we were changing things that Heather Marie, through that, the way you would write the way you would premiere a new play.
Yeah.
You would change things in the moment, or change things depending on who the artists in the room were, to sort of suit some of that energy.
What was interesting for me is that presentation of Chopin Scherzo 1 and 2 with Gallows Humour 1 and 2 that you wrote, delivered, as you're explaining, by Heather, offered a kind of a dual character. There was this dichotomy between the pianist and the actor.
Yeah.
And then I kind of, after we presented that, I started to reflect on the meaning of this text and how it might feel to be delivered by the same person, so that not only was the performer playing the Chopin an integral part of this material, but the actor delivering, which of course led me to kind of to the realization that I have no acting chops. Although I admire actors very much, but I've only ever worked with them, kind of as an outsider. So
yeah.
So it brought me to a very unusual journey. I mean, that I've been on now for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I had enough, I don't know, I had enough chutzpah to think I could learn how to act. That remains to be seen, but I'm going to give it a shot.
I'm sure it's great. I remember even some of just taking a step back, but I remember a couple times where we were trying to have the Heather and you in some sort of movement conversation, right? And I've always loved this idea that the musicians, not in a gimmicky way, but the players are involved, particularly if you're seeing them. Do you know what I mean? So we did this. I did a project with another composer, also on Chopin, in 2012, as part of an opera that premiered in Glasgow, and we had a woman remembering the one encounter she had with Chopin in a bar in the late, late in his life, and how it kind of affected her, but we had the piano player take the Chopin role,
as Chopin.
I mean, it was an inferior player, not the player himself, but the character.
Right.
But he was also playing. So I always love that idea of the interaction. It's a coincidence that it's Chopin in both pieces, I think. But I love that idea of I love the interaction with musicians, that isn't so that kind of creates a level playing field.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like super excited that you've taken this next step to now I'm playing and acting, and you're gonna watch it. I think I think I've said that before, how sort of that's the type of again, I don't even want to use the word hybrid, because it's sort of hybrid means everything now, but this idea that you are taking not taking, but you are offering different interpretations on these four pieces.
Yeah. I think when Tom Diamond realized, in his work with me, that this was going to be for camera, we shifted our focus, and it's really created a lot of surprises, a lot of kind of it's evolved the work. I think it's definitely augmented our interpretation of your four poems, and he's been able to write this big script. He's kind of connected all the dots, and we've got this absolutely bonkers, kind of unfolding of an hour, this storyline that really grows out of your original text.
Well, the visual medium of poetry and the visual medium of film do have some things obviously in common. So I think it's pretty cool that it seems like you're picking up on all that imagery. I think
good. Yeah.
I think that's why the sort of, I generally will approach a poem from a really sensory place, which does suit film pretty well, given that it's fairly sensory, visual, auditory experience. So yeah, I think that's very exciting. Again, so even though I say I didn't quite imagine it getting where it's gone, it doesn't feel like it's forced, if that makes sense. feels like it's all sort of just been a little bit of a every little step up is a step towards what you're up to.
It has really been a evolution. And I think I'm most familiar with number 1 and 2 because and I'm actually, the same goes musically speaking. I mean, Scherzo 3 and 4 are newer pieces for me. But it's been wonderful to kind of learn them in the order that you wrote them, and actually the order that Chopin wrote his Scherzi. I often hear pianists sort of move cycles of Chopin's work around it, so it's not chronological.
Right.
But what we've got here is all 4 Scherzi numbers 1 through 4, and all 4 Gallows Humours 1 through 4 in chronological order. And it sounds like that's how you conceive them. That there's a kind of a full circle at the end.
Yeah, I always thought that if they were going to be performed in a way where you'd hear you play, and then someone came out and spoke, it would be a reaction. So music, and then the poem or the monologue. To be honest, as opposed to the other way around, I never saw them as sort of prologues or here's what you're about to hear. I don't think I didn't want to put myself in that club with Chopin. It was sort of like truly ekphrastic. It's the response.
Yeah.
It's not the other way around. So I thought they needed to touch, if that makes sense. There's that low where the high notes and the low notes touch at the end of the first.
That's the line that finishes poem 1.
Poem 1, yeah. And because I guess, and this isn't to diminish myself, but feeling a little, maybe early on, a little weird about who cares what I have to say about this. Do you know what I mean? So maybe calling myself the low note, maybe putting Chopin at the high note. Maybe there's a subconscious
perhaps
image there. But certainly the idea that they would be companions and not corrections, or sometimes that happens, right? There's the need to sort of refine a piece that you're responding to, or judge it, or this was just sort of, this is what I was hearing. This is the mood I was hearing. So in that first one, with that sort of the beginning of the first scherzi, the joke, the comedy. So piano, right? And then it sort of, to me, got a little sadder near the end.
It does.
Yeah. So again, and I'm trying to be really, really basic to talk about the process, the initial response.
Yeah.
And that followed through with the second one, which is sort of I imagine is a bit more of like a bedside vigil piece originally. This is just, I'm talking about original, not where you've taken it, but thinking of it as a bit more of a, it's much shorter as a result.
Yes, and you structured it as one stanza,
trying to respond to the music. So if and try again, you're not perfect, but making sure that the poems do sort of stand alone, but that if you did have them really close together, there'd be sort of communication between them, little vespers sort of.
I think it makes the performance of this work, of this music, so much more exciting, because the catalog of Chopin is a very well-known quantity to most audiences today. I mean, he only wrote 70 pieces or 75 pieces. So the fact that we have these new works that you've created as companion pieces that, as you rightfully say, stand up to them alone. I mean, these scherzi can be standalone pieces too. But the fact that we've got your work makes it far more interesting. I mean, that's a new perspective. That's kind of the fresh take.
Yeah.
And that's really been what's, it's such a thrill for me to kind of take on this new journey. Not that learning Chopin isn't exciting anymore, but it's something I've been doing for a while.
Yeah, I think also knowing that this was going to be a project that you did and that we did together. I remember, if I'm allowed to go into this for a second, I remember the first time seeing you play, and you were the most expressive classical piano player I had seen play. Granted, I hadn't seen everybody, but I remember seeing you live, and I remember someone saying Adam is a one cheek player.
A one cheek
player, because you're always sort of. You're always it was beautiful, and I thought that he's like, there's choreography to the way that way you were playing, and I thought that was really interesting, that it was that you were confident enough in the playing and the beautiful playing that you were doing, to also sort of put your body into it and put a little bit of that movement into it. I thought that was, again, this could have been naive me, but I just thought it was like kind of interesting. And so knowing that there was a theatricality to even just the concerts that you were playing, I felt sort of very, I felt theatrical with the writing, if that makes sense. I felt like you could, big swinging images, pianos falling on heads, Egyptian mummies, yeah, witches, cowboys. It felt very sort of freeing to do that, which I'm not sure Chopin's music gets associated with those things very often.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
But how wonderful that
Yeah.
you've made those connections.
But part of that, again, it's this whole collaborative thing that I think probably is what we're sort of circling around or getting at or talking about, where you're not only collaborating with an existing piece of music and your response to it, collaborating with the artists that you know you're going to be working with. I think that to me is always is pretty good, pretty joyful, and I think it's very exciting. What you and Tom are cooking up in the lab right now.
Well, David, I mean, I could have a very similar story in getting to know your work, and I mean, I think your association over the years and really fruitful collaboration with the musical community has kind of given you an extra layer of sensitivity. You get musicians and you get composers, and that's a very special thing. Not a lot of writers have that kind of flexibility and perspective.
Well, it's exciting. Someone said this to me once. Said, "You think anything with music is cool, right?" I wrote something and and the composer I was working said, "How does it sound?" I'm like, "Sounds cool." It's like, you always say it's cool. It is cool. It sounds great. It sounds better than if it was just me reading it or so. So again, I always feel very. I've gotten over it a bit, but I do feel very sort of. Honored's a really big word, but I feel very fortunate to get to work with so many people in these various increasingly weirder and weirder projects, right? Because I don't think the for me, I don't think it's I'm going to write I certainly would like to, but a full length piece, and it's 3.5 hours long and it takes 10 years to write. I think the energy in that is, I don't know that my energy is there for that right now. Do you know? So I like these sort of rapidly shifting, morphing, cool projects that kind of end up with the spirit of how they started, but don't end up exactly how they started. The spirit's still there, but not the blue, not the every step along the way.
Well, it's a testament to the strength of your own writing, that it can stand up to all these things, and all these different takes on it. Well, Tom has been, Tom I think has always been a fan of yours, and when we first we worked through these monologues chronologically as well, but so when I was ready to bring in the second, he always says, sit down and read the script, and I read it, and he just took a breath and said, what a fantastic piece of writing.
Well, that's nice of Tom to say.
We can have that on record.
Yeah, please. Can you and it's to sort of get back into the theme of working with people. Tom, my very first attempt at writing for opera was 2008, and Tom was the resident director as part of that program, the composer librettist program, and Tom directed it. So sort of
this was at Tapestry.
At Tapestry, yeah. So, and going all the way back to not having any clue to having this tiny clue now. It's been neat to come back to see what Tom's
he's got such a broad knowledge of both the opera repertory and literature. He cited plays. We've talked about Shakespeare. I'll let you in on one wonderful moment in Monologue 3, where there really is a kind of a life or death action happening. It's kind of this moment, as we often call it, the dark night of the soul. And he compared it to Hamlet. And I said, well, I don't know. I've got, let's just jump in. Let's take a deep dive. And why don't we learn some Hamlet? So actually, he was kind enough, to humor me. And we went through To Be or Not to Be in light of your third monologue, as kind of an exercise.
Cool. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
And
So
he's also compared the fourth one to some Shakespeare. So
that's great.
so you're in mighty company here.
That's great. I mean, that's I don't really have a response to something like that. You can't say, well, thank you. I really do model myself in the
William and I. Yes.
Yeah. Again, Chopin, no, but Shakespeare, absolutely. Yeah, I can stand on that same level. Which I don't think, but yeah, that's really cool, and I like that the idea of using other writing to sort of help access writing. I think that's a really neat little. I'll be thinking about that for at least the rest of the afternoon. But I think that's really a cool little thing.
I think it's just putting it in place of a lineage of kind of a a larger canon, and
I think what's really cool about what I talked about with you and your playing, and also with Tom and his directing, is that you kind of want the audience to have a good time, even if you know what I mean. Like this idea that, well, it has to be film because the audience will not just enjoy it more, but will be able to access it in a way that maybe the poems themselves don't do.
Yeah,
just 4 pieces of paper. I don't know that they necessarily would do that, but I think the attention to this sort of audience experience that you're creating, and that I think in Tom's previous work and the way Tom approaches these things, I think that's pretty exciting to actually say, okay, audience is collaborator too.
Yes.
Even though we're in such a passive screen time where we are passive, we really are more passive than we've ever been as an audience. I like this idea, or I like not the idea, I like what you're doing to sort of try to access that a bit. You know, I've been on this for a while, this idea of what are we doing now? What's next?
Yeah.
And I like this idea that Tom and you seem to be thinking about that, which is not something I was thinking about when I wrote them 3 years ago, because we weren't in this sort of situation.
Yeah, he has expanded it to have a relationship to the camera, i.e., our viewer, because the camera is the viewer.
That's right.
And that kind of interaction has been really fun, and it's helped with the story.
And you're breaking fourth walls and fifth walls, and there's no wall. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the intimacy of the poem, which doesn't have that barrier. I think you're doing a really wonderful thing with crafting, at least pushing to remove some of those barriers. Because I do think even before this, we had a lot of barriers to some of the art that we create. And I think I really like that Tom's approaching this with that in mind. I think that's going to be applicable to after this, when we are back in theaters. That sort of idea that, no, you have to let the audience in. It's not enough to just do a show anymore. It's not enough to just present.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think it ever was. But I think now more than ever, we know it's not enough to just sit there and play, to write something and read it, to yell at an audience or bark at an audience. I think there's got to be that sort of that accessibility and that bringing in. And I think you guys are doing a cool job with it.
I certainly hope so. I mean, we've put a lot of thought and effort into, and I mean, and multiple rewrites as far as his script's concerned.
Right. Well, even giving me opportunities to rewrite the monologues.
Yes.
Knowing that they suited a vision that you had, or the word just wasn't working, or the word didn't make sense. I mean, that's the process for any new work anyway. So it's been great that there's some familiar things in the writing and the creation of this for me, and there's some new things. And I think that maybe every project should have that, right?
Yeah. I think the new elements are what, and I mentioned this earlier, make this so exciting. You know, it's not just a Chopin recital, which a lot of people would enjoy and would be fine, but that's been done before.
Yeah.
And so it's your work that's inspired Tom's evolution with this material, and now we have something completely edgy and fresh and unexpected. I mean, there's still Chopin in there, of course.
Yeah.
But there's all these other things too.
And on that idea of audience, the audience, I'm interested in what the reaction will be, particularly from people who that audience that you're suggesting would just like to hear the music.
David, when we premiered Gallows Humour 1 and 2 with the Scherzos 1 and 2 in 2018, there was a real interesting reaction from a lot of audience members. They didn't quite know what to make of your words. I think they were expecting Chopin and they knew what they were going to get, but the monologues really shed a whole different light and confused people and delighted people and surprised others. What kind of reaction do you think we're going to get from the viewers this time around?
Might be the same. It might be pretty similar. I think now the visual element of it and even I know you have some graphics involved. I think that will make it a bit more of a cohesive experience. Even though I don't necessarily believe it needs to be a cohesive experience. But sometimes it's nice when even the disparate parts fit together and create a whole. So I don't know. I shouldn't predict, so I won't. I hope that the story comes through, and I mean I know the story that's been crafted with you and Tom, but I also mean the story of the language, the story of the monologues, the struggle, the doubt. Again, that's kind of a little bit of the stuff that goes into a lot of my writing. Not necessarily, certainly some self doubt, but sort of this idea of our fragility. A lot of my work is dealing with human fragility. So I kind of hope that comes through. I hope the fact that that you are putting yourself out there as a sort of, I think that there's a sensitivity to that. And I think you're the right person for it, given that when I started writing it, that was what I had in mind for the language, is a struggle, sensitivity. This is generally these monologues are about things that everyone is going to go through, right? Whether it's the loss of someone that they love or the loss of the self, their own, our own deaths, as it were. And so I kind of like this idea of far from predicting what the reaction will be, I think there'll be a lot of different ones, because I think it's a really personal. I think it's a really personal show. I think it is anyway.
Well, thank you for trusting me with these
Yeah.
with these monologues, and in many ways they have pushed me to new limits of what I'm capable of, and learning as an actor to be brave.
Yeah.
And to just go for it. And that's been a wonderful journey as a performer, because it transfers to my musical performance too.
Right. I think that's what's exciting. I think that's the exciting part of any show, any live show.
Yeah.
And this is a live show.
Very much. Very much so.
There's it rarely happens, but in a live show we go because anything could happen.
Yeah.
That's what we say, right? And then generally it doesn't happen. So I'm kind of excited. Again, I keep using that word, but I think audiences are going to see that, again, I don't want to say vulnerability, but that newness, that exploration that you're doing as both a player and a performer.
David, thanks again. Such a pleasure to have you here, and always great to chat. And we're really looking forward to the upcoming performance. So here's to more great things to come.